The village that remembers you. I wasn't supposed to be in Laos. Not really. It was one of those detours that happened because I missed a bus in Thailand, ran out of cash in Chiang Rai, and found a dirt-cheap backpacker forum that whispered about a hidden waterfall no tourist had ever mapped. They always say stuff like that. Hidden, sacred, untouched. Turns out, sometimes untouched means something else entirely. I rented a dusty motorbike with half a fuel tank, packed water, and headed into the hills. No signal, no GPS, just a crumpled paper sketch one guy had drawn on a napkin. And then, somewhere around hour 3, I realized the trail wasn't getting narrower, it was disappearing. The trees pressed closer, roots twisting across the path like veins. Birds fell silent. Even the insects seemed to hush. It felt like walking into someone's lungs, damp, warm, breathing all around you. That's when I saw it. Not a sign, not a gate, just a clearing. And in the clearing, a village. It shouldn't have been there, not because of where it was, but because of how it was. Everything was too still, too perfect. Wooden homes on stilts lined a gentle path. Smoke drifted from chimneys as if frozen in air. A dog lay in the shade, staring straight at me, not barking. And at the end of the path, a woman stood. Old, thin, smiling. She waved. And then she said my name. Not the name on my passport, not the name I used online. She said the name my grandmother used to call me, one that I hadn't heard since I was 5. "Welcome back," she said in Lao. I didn't answer, couldn't, because somehow, deep in a jungle that doesn't exist on any map, a stranger just called me home. I should have turned around. Every instinct, every tiny shiver in my spine screamed for me to step back, get on the bike, and leave. But I didn't, because the old woman didn't stop smiling. And there was something terrifyingly gentle in the way she looked at me. Not like a stranger, like a grandmother seeing her grandson for the first time in decades. She didn't ask who I was. She didn't ask what I wanted. She simply stepped forward, touched my cheek with a trembling hand, and whispered in Lao, "You've grown up beautifully, little Bound." Bound. That name again. The air shifted. A warm breeze rustled the banana leaves, and one by one, the villagers emerged from their homes. They smiled, too, not with suspicion, not like they were curious about the outsider. They smiled like they knew me. One man chuckled and pointed to the small scar on my eyebrow. "You still have that from the mango tree, huh?" Another woman, young, maybe in her 20s, handed me a bundle of rice wrapped in banana leaf. "Your favorite," she said softly, "sticky rice with coconut, just like you liked when you were small." I hadn't told anyone that, not even my girlfriend. More people gathered. Children ran circles around me, laughing. An old man stepped forward, gripping a wooden cane and staring into my eyes. He didn't smile. Instead, he said, "You were buried wrong." The crowd fell quiet. "What?" I stammered. "I think you're mistaken. I'm not from—" "You were buried," he interrupted. "Not remembered. There's a difference." Then he reached into his robe and pulled out a small wooden carving, a figure, hand-carved from dark wood, rough around the edges, a child sitting cross-legged, head bowed. On its back, burned into the wood, was a date. My birthday. I dropped it without meaning to. The villagers didn't move. No one flinched. and the woman beside me knelt slowly, picked it up, and whispered in Lao, "You remember what others forgot." She placed the carving in my hands, gently curling my fingers around it. Then she said something that made the world tilt just slightly off its axis. "You have finally come home. The village's memory is almost complete." And she smiled again. But this time, there was something behind the smile. Something not entirely human. I followed them deeper into the village, not because I trusted them, but because I didn't know where else to go. The jungle behind me felt distant now, like the road I came in on had vanished the moment I stepped into this place. The villagers led me to a small wooden hut, modest but clean. There was a woven mat on the floor, a low table, and a jug of water already poured. The air inside smelled like lemongrass and wet earth. "You can rest here tonight," the old woman said, touching my arm. "But tomorrow," she added, her voice light as wind, "you'll begin to remember." I wanted to ask what she meant, but she had already turned away. Before I could sit, someone was already inside. A man, middle-aged, skin dark from the sun, eyes sharp and familiar in a way I couldn't place. He wore a simple wraparound shirt and loose trousers, just like everyone else in the village. But what chilled me wasn't how he looked. It was how he looked at me. He smiled slowly. "I knew you'd come back," he said. "Do I know you?" I asked, stepping cautiously into the hut. His eyes glinted. "Not anymore, but we used to play together under the jackfruit tree. You hated the smell of it." My throat dried. I had hated that smell, but that was in another country, another life. "Where did we meet?" I asked. He tilted his head. "You were 12 when you drowned. It was fast, peaceful. At least that's what the monk said. But no one ever came for your body." I froze. He kept going. "Your name wasn't bound then. It was Dara, and I was the one who helped bury you." "No," I said quietly. "I've never drowned. I've never been to Laos. I'm from—" He raised a hand, cutting me off. "Place doesn't matter. Memory does. And someone somewhere forgot you when it mattered most." He stood, walked toward the window, and looked out at the village. "That's how it works. We don't come here by accident. The village only calls those whose deaths were unfinished, ungrieved, unheld." My voice cracked. "But I'm not dead." He turned back to me, expression softening. "That's what they all say, until the forgetting begins." He stepped closer, then leaned in, voice dropping to a whisper. "Tell me, what's your mother's voice sound like?" I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. My mind scrambled. Surely I could remember, but the sound had fuzzed, blurred, like a cassette tape warped by heat. He smiled, sadly. "It's starting." I didn't sleep that night. Even with the door closed and the lamp dimmed, the village pulsed with a quiet presence, like it was breathing just beneath the soil. I could hear the slow creak of bamboo in the breeze, the distant hum of chanting I couldn't place, and the soft laughter of children who never seemed to go to bed. When the first light spilled through the window, the woman from before returned. She didn't knock. She simply opened the door and said, "It's ready now." I followed her, still half in a daze, still trying to force my brain to remember my phone number, my apartment, my job title, anything that would anchor me. We walked past the central well, through a path I hadn't noticed the day before, until we reached a stilt house at the edge of the village. It looked older than the others, weathered, but there was a strange charm to it, like something sacred had been preserved inside. She gestured for me to enter. I stepped through the wooden doorway, and everything inside me went still. It was my room, not something like it, not a replica. It was my childhood bedroom from when I was 7. The exact blue curtains, the faded dinosaur bed sheets, the small desk in the corner where I used to draw, even the crack in the ceiling above the bed, the one that looked like a rabbit if you stared long enough. It was there. My drawings were pinned to the wall, the ones I thought my parents had thrown away. There was a toy car on the shelf with a missing wheel. I remembered crying over it for days. My mother had promised to fix it. She never did. I walked to the desk. There was a notebook sitting on top. I opened it. Page after page, filled with my handwriting. Memories I hadn't thought of in years, written out in perfect detail. My tooth fell out today, but I lied to Mom and said it didn't hurt. I dreamed of a village with a red sky. A woman hugged me, but she had no face. I think when I die, I want to disappear like smoke. My hands shook. I flipped to the last page, and there was a sentence in handwriting that wasn't mine. You were never forgotten here. We've been waiting for you to remember. Behind me, the woman spoke. This is your anchor, the part of you that still aches, that still wonders if someone ever truly saw you. I turned, breath caught in my throat. She stood in the doorway, half in shadow, but her eyes, they weren't human anymore. They shimmered with something ancient, endless, like memory made flesh. She whispered, "The village remembers what the world lets fade." And then she asked a question I couldn't answer. Do you remember who you were before you stopped being seen? By midday, I was led to the communal dining hall, a long wooden structure with open sides, nestled beneath a canopy of trees that filtered the sunlight into golden beams. The air smelled sweet, smoky, and nostalgic in a way I couldn't explain. The villagers were already seated on woven mats in a loose circle. They greeted me not like a guest, but like a relative returning from a long journey, as if I belonged there. The woman who had shown me the bedroom earlier, I still didn't know her name, guided me to sit. Then the food arrived. At first, it looked ordinary. Bamboo trays lined with banana leaves, bowls of sticky rice, grilled fish, small plates of pickled vegetables, soup with herbs I couldn't name. But then, I picked up the first bowl and froze. The scent hit me like a punch. Sweet coconut, mung bean, and a faint hint of pandan. I hadn't smelled that in decades. I dipped a spoon into the soft rice and took a bite. And instantly, I was 5 years old again, sitting cross-legged on my grandmother's kitchen floor in a distant province, licking my fingers while she scolded me gently in a voice like rain. I blinked. The next dish, a bitter herb soup, tasted exactly like the one I refused to eat as a child, the one my mother used to trick me into drinking by calling it superhero soup. Even the grilled fish was seasoned with the exact chili paste my father made from scratch, the one I swore I would never eat again after he died. Every bite was a memory I hadn't summoned in years. Not memories I shared, not stories I told anyone. These were private, sacred, buried. How could they know? Across from me, an old man with cloudy eyes raised his bowl and smiled. "We don't cook what you like," he said softly. "We cook what your soul misses." I didn't speak. Couldn't. Tears blurred my vision as I reached for the next dish, a dessert, coconut jelly with the same swirl of pink and green my aunt once molded for my 6th birthday. I hadn't even remembered that day until this very moment. The woman beside me leaned in and said, "The world forgets what it can't hold, but food carries memory in its steam, its salt, its sweetness. That's how we feed you." I looked around the circle. No one was watching me in pity. They were watching me like keepers of my life, like people who had guarded fragments of me I didn't know were lost. Then the old man whispered, "When you die without being remembered, the hunger doesn't stop. It just changes." I stopped chewing, because in that moment, I wasn't sure if I had ever really left this place, or if I had only now returned to finish being mourned. That night, the stars were too bright, too sharp, too still, like someone had painted them onto the sky and dared them to move. I couldn't sleep. The taste of memory still lingered on my tongue, too vivid, too real. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw flashes. My father coughing into his hands behind a closed door. My mother crying quietly at the kitchen sink. Me, much younger, sitting alone in a schoolyard, waiting to be picked up long after the bell had rung. At some point past midnight, I stepped outside the hut. The village was silent, but not dead. There was always a faint hum in the air here, like a choir of moths breathing under the soil. That's when I saw him again, the old man from earlier, the one who said he buried me. He was sitting by the central well, carving something into a piece of driftwood. I approached slowly. He didn't look up. "I remember you cried when the cat died," he said. I paused. "What?" "You buried it in the back garden. Used your mother's kitchen spoon to dig the hole." My breath caught. That wasn't possible. "I never told anyone that," I whispered. He looked up at me, eyes clouded but sharp. "You don't need to tell us. The village remembers what the world refuses to hold." He motioned for me to sit. I did. Then he asked, "Do you know why you were called here?" I didn't answer. He nodded anyway. "You died somewhere, not your body, something deeper, maybe a part of your spirit, maybe your name, your place in someone's heart, but you died, and no one wept properly." I shook my head. "I'm alive. I have a life, a job." "You think you do," he cut in gently. "But tell me, when was the last time someone said your name with love?" Silence. "Do you remember the last time someone touched your face just to remember it?" I couldn't speak. He leaned in, whispering like a priest offering last rites. "You weren't grieved. You were filed away, buried under routine, silence, and moving on. The kind of forgetting that doesn't look like forgetting. That's the worst kind." I looked down at his hands. He was carving another figure. It was small, human-shaped, familiar. I realized with a jolt, it was me, but not as I was now, as I had been, eyes downcast, shoulders slumped, wearing the faded school uniform from the year I had stopped talking at home. He pressed the carving into my hands. "Until someone remembers you with pain, you'll never be truly gone. And until someone remembers you with love, you'll never be fully alive again." Behind me, the village sighed in the wind. and inside my chest, something cracked open. A soft breaking, like ice finally yielding to warmth. I woke up to silence. Not the peaceful kind, not bird song or distant chatter. A hollow silence, the kind that makes you check your own heartbeat to be sure you're still real. The sky outside my window was gray, but unmoving. The trees didn't sway. The air didn't stir. Time had thickened. I reached for my watch. It had stopped. 3:33 a.m. Same as yesterday. Same as the day before, though I wasn't even sure if days were still passing. I tried turning on my phone. Dead. Not drained, dead. The screen stayed black, unresponsive, like it had given up trying to connect with a world that no longer wanted it. I rushed outside. The village was awake, but not alive. People moved, yes, sweeping, cooking, tending to the animals, but their movements were too fluid, too practiced, like actors trapped in a dream they'd repeated for centuries. "Excuse me," I called to one of them, a young boy sitting on the steps of a house. He turned slowly. "What day is it?" I asked. He smiled. "The day we remember." "No, I mean, what's today's date?" He tilted his head. "Why would it matter? You're not going anywhere." A chill rippled down my spine. I asked 3 more people. Each gave a different answer. Tuesday. Full moon. After the red bird flew. None of them made sense. Back in the hut, I searched through my belongings. My passport was still there, but the photo looked wrong. It was me, but younger. Eyes dull, blank. Like someone had taken the picture the moment I stopped caring if I existed. The ink on the name had smudged. Half the letters had faded, as if my own identity was beginning to rot. I gripped the bed frame, breathing hard. Okay, this isn't real. This isn't real. That's when I saw it. On the far wall, near the woven mat, a calendar hung, handmade, each page stitched from cloth. I walked over and touched the top. It was on month 0. Every square read the same phrase in Lao. "The day you were almost forgotten." Suddenly, the door creaked open behind me. The woman stood there again. She held a bundle in her arms, a folded garment, pale blue and soft. "My son used to wear this," she said, offering it to me. "You used to sleep in it when he died. He looked just like you." I didn't take it. I just stared at her and asked the only question that made sense anymore. "How long have I been here?" She smiled, gently, sadly. "Long enough for the world to stop asking about you." She took my hand without asking. Her grip was warm, steady, like a mother guiding a child through a storm. I didn't resist. We walked past the silent homes and motionless trees, deeper into the village than I'd ever been. The path narrowed, turning to moss-covered stones. Vines hung low like curtains, brushing against my shoulders. It felt like crossing into another layer of the dream, thicker, older. At the end of the path stood a shrine, not a temple, not exactly, It looked like a hollowed-out cliffside, its mouth shaped like a scream stopped mid-breath. Smoke curled from within, and faint whispers, real or imagined, echoed out with the wind. The woman didn't speak. She only nodded, urging me to enter. Inside, it was dark. The only light came from thin candles wedged into cracks along the stone wall, flickering like dying memories. Then I saw them. Names. Thousands of them. Etched into the stone. Some with ink, some with ash, some carved with what looked like fingernails. No order, no dates, just names overlapping, scratched out, rewritten again and again. Some names were familiar. Others were written in languages I didn't recognize. I stepped closer. The walls seemed to pulse. Then I saw it. My name. Not just once. 3 times. The first, half erased, like someone tried to forget me but couldn't. The second, clear, bold, but cracked down the middle. The third, freshly carved, still bleeding sap from the stone. I reached out to touch it. The moment my fingers brushed the groove of my own name, I heard a voice, not spoken aloud, but inside me. They left without remembering, so we remember for them. I stumbled back, gasping. The woman had been standing quietly behind me. She stepped forward now, her voice low and ancient. Each name here belongs to a soul who slipped from the world too quietly, unwept, unspoken, unseen, until they were summoned here. I shook my head. But I'm not alive, she finished softly. Then she pointed to the top of the shrine, where one name, larger than all the others, was painted in red. It was blank, a space waiting for a name to be carved that hadn't been fully forgotten. She looked at me. The village hasn't finished remembering you. That's why you haven't disappeared. I turned back to the wall, and just beneath my own name, someone had already started carving a 4th entry. Only the first few letters were there, but it was enough to know I didn't have much time. I ran, out of the shrine, out of the suffocating cave of names, out into the jungle air which now felt too thick, too heavy, like I was breathing in wet wool. I didn't know where I was running to, just that I had to move, to feel the ground under my feet, to remind myself that I was still real. The woman didn't follow, but something else did, the sound, a low, rhythmic hum beneath the earth, a heartbeat that wasn't mine, the village's. I broke through a row of palms and stumbled into a clearing. And there he was. A man, tall, thin, European with sunburned skin and shaggy hair, sitting cross-legged beside a crumbling altar. His clothes were old, weather-stained, but not torn. He looked like someone who hadn't spoken in years, but never forgot how. He glanced at me, then smiled. "Took you long enough," he said in a thick French accent. "They always run around the 9th day." I froze. You speak English?" He chuckled. "I used to, before the vowels started slipping out." "Who are you?" He patted the ground beside him. "Sit, you'll remember faster." I didn't move. He shrugged. "Suit yourself, but they're carving your 4th name now. You don't have many chances left." That pulled me closer. I sat, still wary, still breathless. "How long have you been here?" I asked. He scratched his beard.
Time doesn't work here. But if I had to guess, 30 years? 40? Or maybe just one very long memory. Why haven't you left? He grinned. I tried. Walked for days. Circled back every time. Thought I could outsmart it. But you can't outwalk what you carry. He pointed to his chest. You left pieces of yourself out there, but the world didn't keep them, didn't want them. So this place did. I swallowed hard. Then, what is this place? He grew quiet, then said, It's a village for the almost dead, for the ones who slipped through cracks so small no one noticed. We are the unmourned, the unfinished stories, the photos no one framed, the funerals no one held. I stared at him. You mean ghosts? He smiled sadly. Not quite. Ghosts know they're dead. We are still waiting for someone to notice we're missing. He reached into a pouch and pulled out a faded photograph. It was of a young boy, no more than 6, sitting alone at a birthday table. No cake, no guests. That's me, he whispered. My parents forgot. Just forgot. They were busy. They said we'd celebrate later. They didn't even realize I ran away. He looked at the picture for a long time before folding it and tucking it away. By the time they cared, it was too late, and this place remembered first. I felt sick. What happens if I don't leave? He looked me dead in the eye. You forget. Forget what? He leaned closer. You forget that you were ever real.
I didn't sleep that night. Not because I didn't try, but because sleep didn't come. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt something tugging from behind my thoughts, like fingers made of mist, peeling pieces of me away. The man, the one in the clearing, had warned me, but I didn't understand until I reached for my memories and found air. It started small. I couldn't recall the name of my high school. Then I forgot my old phone number. By morning, my favorite song, the one I used to hum whenever I was anxious, was gone. The tune, the title, the artist, erased like chalk in rain. I stared into the cracked mirror in the hut and asked, "What's my last name?" Nothing. Silence. Just the sound of the village breathing behind me, the gentle creak of wood, the rustle of leaves that no longer moved with wind, but with intention. Panic rose in my throat. I dug through my bag, fingers trembling. I pulled out my passport. The photo was still there, but the ink had bled. My name was now a blur. My birth date, missing the year. I flipped through my notebook. The pages were blank. Even my handwriting had disappeared. That's when the knock came. 3 slow taps. I opened the door. It was a child, a girl, maybe 8 years old. Long black hair, 2 thin wrists, and eyes like she knew secrets she was never supposed to keep. She held out a folded piece of paper. I took it, unfolded it. Inside, in shaky, almost childlike handwriting, were the words,
Write it down before it leaves you. No name, no greeting. I looked up, but the girl was gone. I grabbed the pencil from the floor and began scribbling onto the wooden wall of the hut. Names, dates, faces, anything I could still remember. Mom, voice like rain. Dad, chili paste too spicy. Blue bicycle, broken chain, summer. Me, Baun, Dara. Every word I wrote felt like it was being pulled out of water, and every time I stopped, the village smiled. I could feel it. Not in any one face, but in the air. Like the very ground beneath me was fed by the memories I lost. I stepped outside, desperate, breath ragged. The shrine in the distance was glowing, faint red. Someone was carving again. Another name, another version of me.
I hadn't heard music since I arrived, not a single melody, not until tonight. It started with a single drum beat at dusk, low, distant, like a heartbeat echoing off the trees. Then came the flutes, soft and high, almost bird-like. They didn't play any song I recognized, but something in my bones knew when each note would land, like I'd heard it in another life, another version of myself. The entire village had gathered in the central square. Paper lanterns floated from rooftops, swaying without wind. Candles burned in bowls of water. Flowers I'd never seen before, blue with black veins, lined the path leading into the clearing. Everyone wore white, except me. The same child from earlier, the girl with the paper, found me again. She handed me a folded robe and said, "Put this on. They're telling your story tonight." I didn't ask what that meant. I just obeyed. The moment I stepped into the square, the villagers turned to face me, not smiling, not angry, just watching, as if they'd been waiting for this. At the center of it all stood a great fire pit, unlit. The old man, the one who said he buried me, stepped forward holding a single ember in a clay bowl. He spoke loudly, voice deep, vibrating through my chest. "Tonight we remember one who was not remembered." The villagers responded in one voice, "We call them home." The fire roared to life. Then the stories began, not in words, but in ritual. One by one, villagers stepped into the circle and acted out moments of my life. I watched, frozen, as a man mimicked my childhood tantrum after my mother forgot to pick me up from school. A woman pretended to pack her suitcase while crying silently, just like my girlfriend had, the night she left me for saying I was too absent. Then came the part I couldn't look away from. A boy knelt down, miming someone choking, drowning, while others turned their backs on him. Water was poured over him from a bowl, and still, no one came to save him. I couldn't breathe. It was me, not literally, but emotionally, symbolically. All the parts of me that died while I kept walking. Moments where I should have been seen, saved, loved, but wasn't. The final act was simple. The villagers gathered in a circle, each holding a single petal. One by one, they placed the petals at my feet. Then the old man said, "And now that we've remembered you, will you remember us?" I opened my mouth to answer, but the words didn't come, because suddenly, in that firelight, with everyone watching, I wasn't sure what, me, there was left to speak. I ran again.
Not because I thought I could escape, but because staying meant surrendering, and something in me still screamed for elsewhere, for concrete, cold rain, fluorescent lights, for the mundane discomfort of the world I used to belong to. I didn't stop to pack, didn't say goodbye. I just moved, through trees, through mist, through branches that tried to hold me back like fingers woven from fog. And then I saw it. The road. The one I had come in on, or so I thought. It stretched out, cracked and muddy, curving back toward the outer jungle. I could see my footprints, my tire marks. I was close. I ran harder, lungs burning. But with each step, the trees began to look the same. Left, right, straight, back. A path with no direction. After 15 minutes, I was certain I was looping. After 30, I was absolutely certain. Every bend, every rock, every knot in every tree, identical. I stopped. The village wasn't chasing me. It didn't need to. It just waited. Because the forest was it. That's when I heard it again. The humming. That low, rhythmic, ancient sound vibrating beneath my feet, a lullaby for the forgotten. Then, from behind a tree, she appeared. The woman. She wasn't out of breath. She wasn't angry. She wasn't even surprised. She just looked at me with eyes filled with something worse than sadness. Understanding. "You tried," she said gently. I didn't answer. "You thought you still belonged somewhere else." I clenched my fists. "I do. I have friends, a life." Her head tilted. "Name them." My lips parted. But the names were gone. Not just the names, the faces. All I saw were silhouettes in empty rooms, voicemails with no sound, hugs that never landed. She stepped closer. "We don't trap you," she whispered. "We don't chain you here. We only hold what the world discards." "I'm not discarded," I choked. She nodded. "Then why hasn't anyone come looking for you?" Her words sliced clean through. Because it was true. I hadn't gotten a message, a call, a search party. No one had followed. No one had knocked on doors or posted flyers. I had vanished, and the world kept turning. Behind me, the jungle breathed. She stepped beside me now, her voice barely above silence. "Stay, and we will remember everything you thought was lost. Leave, and you will return to a world that already forgot you." My knees buckled. I fell to the earth. And in that moment, I realized even worse than dying. Being alive where no one remembers you felt exactly like being dead. I don't remember walking back. I only remember arriving. The hut felt different now, heavier, as if something unseen had settled into the walls while I was gone. The lamp on the floor flickered, even though no one had lit it. The shadows clung to the corners like cobwebs that breathed. And then I saw it. A painting. I was sure it hadn't been there before. It leaned against the far wall, wrapped in a frame of dark, hand-carved wood, twisted like bone. The canvas was rough, textured, smelling faintly of smoke and something metallic. Blood, maybe. And the portrait? It was me. Not me exactly, but close enough to be uncomfortable. The figure in the painting sat cross-legged, dressed in white, eyes half shut like in prayer or surrender. Around him, the village blurred like oil in water. The sky was red, the trees wilted. But the most disturbing thing? He was aging. As I stared, the lines on his face deepened. His hair grayed, his posture slumped further. The paint didn't dry, it shifted.
The portrait was alive. I took a step back, and the eyes in the painting snapped open. They looked straight at me. Not a trick of light, not imagination. The portrait was watching. I stumbled toward the door, but before I could touch the handle, a voice came from behind me. Not aloud, but inside my head, scraping along the edges of thought like a dull knife. Every time you forget, I grow. I spun around. No one was there, just the portrait, still changing. The figure was older now, eyes sunken, mouth sewn shut with strokes of black. Around his neck was a garland of names, my names, all the ones the village had carved, all the versions of me I was no longer sure were true. I grabbed the painting, ready to throw it, burn it, destroy whatever cursed canvas this was, but my fingers stuck to the frame. The wood pulsed beneath my skin, warm, hungry. I couldn't pull away. Then I saw it, behind the portrait, on the wall, a new outline, a fresh canvas, blank, waiting. The village didn't want to remember me. It wanted to preserve me, lock me into its gallery of half-forgotten souls, a living memory trapped in oil and ash, watched for eternity by eyes that were once my own. From the shadows, the woman whispered, "We don't steal the living. We paint what the world no longer sees." I fell to my knees, and the painting blinked. That night, the rain came, not falling from the sky, but rising from the earth, a mist that seeped up through the soil, curling around my legs as I walked. Thick, damp, memory-laced. The villagers lit no fires. There was no music, no laughter, only stillness, the kind that presses against your chest like a stone you can't cough out. The woman led me again, silently, this time to the highest point of the village, a shrine carved into the side of a hill, half swallowed by tree roots and moss. Inside sat a single man, impossibly old, skin like paper, eyes like dried ink. The elder. No one else was allowed near. He did not look up when I entered. He just spoke. The village was not built. It grew. His voice cracked with age, but every syllable struck with precision. It began with one soul, a boy who died during famine. His mother forgot him on purpose, not out of cruelty, but survival. She buried him without a name. He looked up. His eyes, blind, stared through me. The earth named him. The wind carved his story into the trees. The river whispered his name to strangers, and the village began to remember. I swallowed, unsure whether to sit or run. He gestured to the stone beside him. I sat. Every time someone dies without grief, we grow. Every time a name fades from the lips of the living, a new room is added, a new face appears in the fire, a new story demands telling. He reached into a pouch beside him and pulled out something wrapped in cloth. A tooth. Small, human, old. "This was the first thing we found," he said. "Not his name, not his body, just this, but it was enough to remember." He handed it to me. I didn't want to touch it, but I did. The moment my fingers closed around it, images flooded my mind. A crying boy in the rain, clutching his belly. A mother screaming into a river. A shallow grave dug by trembling hands. And then nothing. Silence. Erased.
until this place pulled it back. I opened my eyes. The elder was watching me, blind yet all-seeing. "You were never meant to be here so long," he said. I looked up, startled. "What?" "You were not here because you died. You are here because no one mourned the living version of you when he disappeared." My throat tightened. "How do I leave?" He was silent. Then, slowly, he whispered, "You must be remembered while still forgotten." I didn't understand, but deep down, something in me already knew what he meant. Someone, somewhere, has to grieve you while believing you're still alive. Only then will the village let go. Only then will it stop watching. Only then will you be free.
They called it a ceremony, but it felt like a funeral. One not for the dead, but for the almost gone. For those who were still walking, still breathing, but had long slipped from the warmth of memory. The villagers gathered at the riverbank just before moonrise. Torches lined the shore, their flames trembling as if in mourning. A long wooden raft sat on the water, covered in white petals, lengths of red thread, and a single black stone. The woman took my hand again. This time I didn't resist. "You will lie there," she said gently, nodding toward the raft. "Why?" Her reply was soft. "Because to leave here, someone must weep for you." She placed a small clay bowl in my hands, filled with water from the well, mixed with ash. "This is memory," she said, "not yours, theirs." I stepped onto the raft. It rocked beneath my weight like breath being held. I lay down, staring up at the moon. The villagers formed a perfect circle around the shore. Then they began to speak, but not in a language I understood, not fully. It wasn't speech, it was recitation, memories, griefs, losses, echoing into the dark. And they weren't just speaking about me, they were speaking as me. A child's voice cried, "Why didn't anyone come for me when the door closed?" An old woman whispered, "I was so quiet, they forgot I was still in the room." A man sobbed, "I disappeared in front of their eyes and they called it growing up." Each line pierced something inside me I didn't know was still bleeding. Then came the final chant. Everyone, all at once, lifted their arms and shouted into the trees, "We remember what the world refused! We cry so the forgotten can leave!" And for the first time since arriving, I wept. Not because I was sad, but because someone, finally, was grieving me. Not for what I had done, not for who I had become, but simply because I had once existed and been unseen. The ash water bowl slipped from my fingers and spilled onto my chest. The petals on the raft stirred. The red threads curled around my wrists. The black stone at my feet vanished. And as the river slowly pulled the raft from the shore, I heard the village whisper, "You are no longer alone in forgetting." The river drifted in silence. No current, no wind, just a slow, steady pull, like time itself was carrying me through a memory I couldn't wake from. The petals around me had turned gray, the threads unwound. Then the fog came, thick, heavy, breathing. I sat up on the raft. Ahead, through the white veil, a figure waited at the bend in the river, still, motionless, facing me. As I drew closer, I realized something was wrong with the shape. It was human, yes, but wrong. Too still, too exact, too much like me. I stopped breathing, because standing on the shore was a version of myself. Same height, same build, same posture, but the eyes. There were no eyes, just black, empty sockets. The skin was pale, veined, faintly flickering as if it wasn't fully real. The mouth curled upward, not in a smile, but in mockery. The raft stopped. I didn't step off. I couldn't. But the thing stepped on. It walked toward me with perfect calm, placing one foot in front of the other like it had done this before, like this moment had been waiting. Then it spoke, in my voice, only flat, stripped of breath, a dead echo. I am the part of you the world didn't bury properly. I tried to speak. Nothing came out. You kept walking, but you left me behind, in the closet, in the hospital room, in the moment you smiled, even though no one saw you. It knelt in front of me. You escaped by forgetting, but I stayed. I remembered everything. Its fingers, my fingers, reached toward my face. I jerked back. "What do you want?" I whispered. It leaned closer. "To return." Suddenly, the raft shook. The water rippled black. Images began flashing on the surface, moments from my life I'd buried. Me crying in a locked bathroom. Me staring at a phone that never rang. Me blowing out birthday candles alone. Then the shadow spoke again. "You cannot leave until we are whole." I understood now. This village didn't just collect the forgotten. It preserved the version of us that broke and was never healed. And now, that version wanted back in. I looked the shadow in its eyeless face. "If I let you return, what happens to me?" It tilted its head. "You become honest." Then it reached out its hand. I hesitated, because maybe it wasn't evil. Maybe it wasn't a demon. Maybe it was just the part of me that never got to say. That hurt. And I'd spent a lifetime pretending otherwise. I don't remember how I got back to the hut. One moment I was on the raft, staring into the face of my own forgotten pain. The next, I was inside 4 wooden walls, soaked in river mist, my hands trembling. My skin felt thin, like parchment stretched over memory. The village was silent again, but it was no longer empty. It watched now, not with eyes, but with mirrors. They were everywhere, hung above doorways, balanced on stumps, floating on bowls of still water, all turned inward, all waiting. Inside the hut, there was only one. A single mirror, round, framed in braided black vine, leaned against the far wall. I stood before it and saw nothing. No face, no outline, no breath fogging the glass. I waved my hand. The mirror didn't respond, but something moved behind the glass. Not a reflection, a silhouette. It stepped forward from the other side. Same shape, same height, same posture. But this version of me didn't blink, didn't breathe. He just stood there, behind the veil of silver, like a fish behind ice. Then his mouth moved. "There you are." No sound, just the words forming on lips that weren't mine anymore. I stumbled back, the mirror rippled like water, and he stepped forward again, palms pressed to the glass from the inside. "You don't belong to the living, not fully, not anymore." The hut felt smaller, the air thickened, the walls pulsed like lungs filling with grief. I turned to run, but the door was gone. Only mirrors now, one on each wall,
each showing a different version of me. Me smiling politely at a party, eyes dead. Me staring at a computer screen, surrounded by people, but utterly alone. Me walking down a street, unnoticed, fading. The real me stood in the center, alone, unreflected. The voice came again, now all around me, in stereo. You were erased slowly, every day, a little more, a little quieter, until you looked in a mirror and saw nothing left. I fell to my knees, because it was true. I couldn't remember the last time I looked into a mirror and believed I existed, really existed. Not as a function, not as a shell, but as a person worth being seen. The central mirror cracked, a single fracture, like a vein, split across its surface. And then, for just 1 second, I saw myself. Not as I am now, but as I was once. Smiling without fear, eyes full of light, unhidden, unforgotten. Then it vanished, and all the mirrors turned dark.
Morning came, but not like before. There was no sun, no bird song, only a pale silver light that felt borrowed, as if the sky had forgotten how to be itself. Outside the hut, the villagers moved slower than usual. Their eyes avoided mine. Their smiles had dimmed. The woman was waiting for me, the one who had guided me from the beginning, but she held no warmth today. In her hands was a folded envelope, worn, stained, torn at the edges like it had traveled too far and for too long. She held it out to me. "This was meant for you," she said quietly, "but it never arrived." I took it. My name was written on the front, in handwriting that twisted something deep in my stomach. I knew it. It was my mother's. Not the memory version from the village, the real one. Shaky, rushed, imperfect, real. My fingers trembled as I opened it. The paper inside had yellowed, smelled faintly of tears and dust. I unfolded it slowly. There were only a few lines, written in broken English, in a mother's voice that tried its best with words it barely knew. "My son, I'm sorry. I didn't see you slipping. I thought you were just quiet, strong, good boy. But you were fading, and I didn't know how to call you back. If you see this, I want you to know, I remember. I remember you when you were 5, when you cried alone, when I was too tired. I remember you when you were 15, and I said nothing. I remember you now, even if I can't find the words. Please, come home." I didn't realize I was crying until the paper blurred, until my hands shook so badly I had to sit down on the step. The woman sat beside me, silent. After a long while, she said, "That letter was written but never sent." I turned to her. "Why do you have it?" Her eyes glistened. "Because unspoken grief lives here. All that was meant to be felt, but wasn't. All the love withheld by fear or silence or pride. You were summoned because this grief was incomplete." I looked down at the letter again. Each word burned. Each apology pulled something loose inside me I didn't know was still stuck. Then she whispered,
Now that it has reached you, you are closer to choosing. I looked up. Choosing what? She stood slowly, whether to return or to stay. She walked away, fading into the fog, and I stayed there on the steps, letter clutched in my hands, knowing that for the first time in years, someone remembered me with love, not out of habit, not out of duty, but with pain. And somehow, in this village of echoes and ash, that was the most living thing I'd felt in a very, very long time. They called me to the hilltop that night, the same path where the elder had once sat, where the roots curled like sleeping hands, and the wind didn't blow unless it remembered your name. But this time, the elder wasn't there, only the woman, and two objects laid before her on a woven mat. A small, smooth stone, pale gray, with a single crack down the center. A tiny, fragile mirror, barely the size of a palm, wrapped in red thread. She looked up at me. Her face was calm, gentle, but her eyes, they had stopped blinking. Tonight, the village will let you choose. My heart beat louder than her voice. The stone means you stay. You will be remembered fully. We will carry every version of you, every moment, until you are whole. She paused. The mirror means you return, but not as you were. When you look in it, a memory will be taken, the price of passage, a piece of yourself gone forever. I stared down at the two objects. They seemed so simple, but they weighed like galaxies. What kind of memory? I asked. Her answer was a whisper. One that defines you. Silence. The village watched from behind the trees, behind the mist, not physically, but in presence. I felt it breathing again, felt its hush, its patience, waiting like a god that doesn't need worship, only acknowledgement. I knelt. My fingers hovered between the stone and the mirror. If I chose the stone, I would never be forgotten. Not again. I would live among the others, not as a prisoner, but as something sacred, preserved, seen, but not free. If I chose the mirror, I could leave, but someone inside me would disappear. A laugh, a face, a voice that once said, "I love you." Gone. No choice was without loss. Then I heard it, a whisper in the trees. She remembers you now. My mother, the letter, the grief, the tiny ripple of sorrow carried from a forgotten corner of the world into this haunted place, and that changed everything. Because for the first time, someone remembered me and regretted it, not out of guilt, but out of love. That was enough. I reached out. My fingers closed around the mirror. The red thread unraveled. The mirror pulsed warm, then cracked. A sudden breath was pulled from my lungs. A moment vanished from my mind, quick, silent, and complete. I didn't know which one. I would never know. But I felt lighter, emptier, and free. The woman nodded once. Go, before the village changes its mind. I walked. No one stopped me. No goodbyes, no songs, just the sound of my footsteps on damp earth
fading behind me like the final beats of a story no one finished reading. The village did not vanish. It waited, like it always had, like it always would, for the next soul who slipped too quietly through the cracks of someone else's life. The path was clear now. The jungle, once a knot of repeating trees and impossible turns, had parted like it was letting go. The mist no longer clung to my skin. The humming beneath the ground had quieted. Still, I felt it, the absence. Whatever memory the mirror had taken, it left a hollow. Not pain, not numbness, just missing. I tried not to think about what I had traded. A smile, a goodbye, a promise I made to someone I loved. I would never know. That was the price. And somehow, that made it sacred. Hours passed, or minutes, or maybe days. Time was untrustworthy now. But eventually I saw it. The broken road, the tire tracks, my motorbike, rusted, untouched, exactly where I left it. The world had kept turning without me. The jungle didn't notice I'd gone. The air smelled like gasoline and rain. I touched the key. It turned. The engine coughed once, then purred, like it had been waiting. I rode, and behind me the forest swallowed the trail like it had never been there. By the time I reached the first town, muddy roads, blinking lights, plastic chairs stacked in alleys, everything felt wrong. Too bright, too noisy, too unaware. People laughed, walked past me, talked on phones. Not a single person looked me in the eye. But I didn't feel invisible because I had been remembered just once. And that was enough to bring me back. I checked into a small guest house. The woman at the desk asked for my name. I opened my mouth and paused. It came slowly, carefully, like learning how to say it for the first time. But it came. She smiled and handed me the key. Room 9. I climbed the stairs, sat on the bed, stared at the mirror, and for the first time in years, I saw a face. Tired, older, but there. I existed. Somewhere far away, a village remembered me. And tonight, I remembered me too. I woke up in the guest house at 3:33 a.m. Again, the same hour the watch stopped ticking in the village. The same hour the mirror first refused to show me. I sat up, drenched in sweat. This wasn't the jungle. This wasn't the mist. This was real life, right? Right? But something felt off. The toothbrush in the bathroom had already been used, even though I had just checked in. The shampoo bottle had my brand on it, the exact one I used years ago. The clothes folded in the drawer were in my size, my style, my scent. I stepped out into the street. It was morning, kind of, but the sunlight wasn't right. Too pale, too slow. People walked by, faces blank, movements muted, like they were following a choreography they didn't understand. And none of them looked at me. I passed a mirror in the cafe window. My reflection stared back, still there. But something had changed. He blinked a beat too late. His smile was a second too slow. Then, inside the cafe,
a woman lifted her head from behind the counter and said my name. Boone? I froze. She looked confused, startled, like she'd said it without knowing why. I stepped in slowly. Do I know you? She shook her head, laughing nervously. No, sorry, I don't know where that came from. But her eyes filled with tears. And just before she turned away, she whispered, I dreamed of a village last night. I left without finishing my coffee because I realized something terrifying. I had left the village, but it hadn't left me. It had followed me back. Or worse, this world had always been part of it. I found him 3 days later. Not on purpose, but like everything else since the village, I wasn't sure anything was accidental anymore. He was sitting in the back of a dusty bar, tucked in an alley where the buildings leaned too close together, as if whispering secrets only the dead could understand. I didn't recognize him at first, but when he looked up, I saw it. In his eyes, in the way he didn't blink. He had been there too. I sat down across from him without asking. He didn't smile, didn't speak, just stared at me with a kind of exhausted knowing that comes only from walking through places where memory eats you from the inside out. Finally, I asked, You escaped? He chuckled, once, dry. No one escapes, he said. We just get out. He looked at his glass, untouched. I left before the ritual, before the choice, before the shadow. I swallowed. How? His fingers tightened around the glass. I refused to be remembered. The words fell between us like a curse. You what? He leaned forward, his voice lowered. I destroyed every tether, burned every photo, changed my name, cut ties, forgot on purpose. I erased myself from everyone's life before the village could finish remembering me. I stared at him. That's why they couldn't hold me, he said. There was nothing left to remember. For a moment, I almost envied him, until I looked closer. His face was hollow, not just thin, but unfinished, as if time had stopped sculpting him halfway through. His voice, even, seemed to echo just slightly after he spoke, delayed, disconnected. You're not real, I whispered. He smiled, and in that smile was tragedy. I don't know, he said. Maybe I'm not. Maybe this world isn't. Maybe I live in a space between, forgotten by the village, ignored by the living, a ghost without a death. I tried to ask more, but he stood up, and before I could stop him, he was gone. No door opened, no feet walked. He simply vanished. I sat there a long time, the untouched drink across from me proof that someone had been there. Maybe. The bartender came over, confused. Were you talking to yourself? I didn't answer, because maybe I was. Maybe he was the future I had avoided, the version of me that had refused to be remembered, and now wandered endlessly through places that didn't belong to the living or the dead. And suddenly, I wasn't sure I had left the village at all. It began with a dream. At least, I think it was a dream. I was back in the village. Same mist, same air, thick with memory. But everything was wrong. The people weren't smiling anymore. They were still, utterly still,
standing in perfect rows around the shrine, their eyes closed, mouths stitched shut with red thread. In the center, on a stone slab, someone lay motionless. I stepped closer. It was me. Not the me who had left, but the one who had stayed. Pale, preserved, peaceful. And around him, vines had begun to grow, not from the earth, but from the memories. They sprouted from letters, from voices once heard, from gestures that were never finished. They tangled gently around his body like mourners, refusing to let go. Then I heard her voice, the woman from the village, but it came from inside me now. To be remembered forever is not a blessing. The villagers began to hum, low, melancholic, a sound that didn't vibrate in the air, but in the soul. She continued, "The ones who stay become sacred, but they also become statues. We honor them by freezing them in the moment they were last forgotten." I turned to look at myself again. The still body on the slab had opened its eyes. They were weeping, tears of ink, dark and thick, like melted photographs. The voice whispered, "To stay is to be remembered so completely you can never change again." And I understood. The village preserved those it remembered perfectly, painfully, permanently, like stories carved into stone. They would never be forgotten, but they would also never be free. They would never be allowed to evolve, never to grow, never to forgive or be forgiven. They were sealed inside the echo of their last sorrow. And I had almost become one of them. I woke up gasping, alone, back in the guest house. But something had followed me out of that dream. I went to the mirror. There, just for a flicker of a second, behind my own reflection, stood him, the version of me that stayed, eyes full of ink, mouth closed forever in the shape of almost. It started with a message request, an old friend, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. The type of connection you leave behind in silence, not because of malice, just life. He wrote, "Hey, I don't know why, but I thought of you today. I had the weirdest dream last night. You were walking into Fob, and I was calling after you, but you couldn't hear me. Are you okay?" My hands trembled. I hadn't told anyone where I'd been, hadn't explained the weeks I was missing, hadn't dared. But somehow, even now, someone had begun to remember me. Too late. I replied, just a short message. I think I almost disappeared. He didn't answer. Not that night, not the next. But I kept hearing things. At first, faint. A voice in the hallway whispering my name. An old voicemail I swear I deleted, suddenly restored. A photo on my phone, time-stamped yesterday, of me as a child, standing alone in the village. Things that shouldn't exist. Because now, people were trying to remember me. But memory doesn't heal cleanly once it breaks. 2 days later, I got a call. My mother. Her voice was cracked, fragile. She said, "I've been having dreams of you as a little boy, lost in the woods. I was screaming for you. Silence. Why do I feel like I almost forgot you? I didn't know what to say. Because she had. Because everyone had. And now they were grieving a version of me that no longer existed. She cried. And for the first time, it didn't comfort me. Because the grief had arrived too late. The ritual was already done. The mirror already broken. They remembered me after the forgetting had consumed part of me. And so the real curse wasn't being forgotten. It was being seen just one moment too late. When what they remembered wasn't me anymore, just the outline of someone they used to love. That night I stood in front of the mirror again. My reflection blinked slower than me, moved later than me, smiled when I didn't. And I knew I was no longer the only one inside my skin. I left the city. No note, no bags, no real reason, except the quiet voice I'd started hearing in my sleep. Not a whisper, not a scream, just a presence, deep, low, and old, like roots shifting beneath floorboards, too slow to hear, but too heavy to ignore. It would murmur things at night, just below my consciousness. You remember too much. You were never meant to leave unfinished. Return to where you were planted. At first I thought it was madness, the aftermath of trauma, a lingering echo. But then the signs began. Moss growing on my bedroom wall overnight. Soil under my fingernails each morning, though I hadn't touched earth. My breath leaving mist on mirrors even in summer heat. Something beneath the surface was calling me back. I found myself in a forest I didn't remember entering. Not the same jungle, but close. A sibling, maybe. One that knew my scent. There was no path, just instinct. And a sound, soft at first, then clearer. A heartbeat beneath the ground. I knelt, pressed my palm to the earth, and I heard it. A voice, my voice from beneath. It wasn't crying, it wasn't screaming, it was waiting. I began to dig, hands tearing through leaves, through soil, through decades of buried memory. I didn't know what I was searching for until I found it. A box, wooden, old, tied shut with red thread, fraying at the edges. I untied it. Inside, a photograph, a single shoe, a lock of hair, and a note written in the same crooked handwriting from the letter my mother never sent. Forgive me. I didn't know how to keep you. The voice spoke again, now fully awake beneath me. Not all roots are meant to stay underground. Some grow into ghosts when you leave them unspoken. I clutched the box to my chest because I knew now the village hadn't just kept my forgotten self. It had buried pieces of me inside the world, in places I'd never look unless I was ready to remember everything. That night, as I slept beneath the trees, the roots curled gently around my legs, not to pull me down, but to hold me, to remind me what grows in silence still speaks. I woke to stillness. Not peace, stillness. Like the world had taken a breath in the night and forgotten how to exhale. Bird song, gone. Wind, gone. The light, wrong. It wasn't dark, exactly, but neither was it morning. The sky glowed with a soft, colorless haze, like morning had been promised but never delivered. I checked my watch.
3:33 a.m. Again, it hadn't moved. I stood, box still clutched in my arms. The forest around me had changed. No longer wild, no longer dense. It was structured now, as if the trees had realigned overnight into corridors, hallways of bark and breathless air. And the deeper I walked, the more I realized. There was no sun, only the memory of sunlight. Branches overhead were woven too tightly for light to pierce, but I could feel a glow, as if it was leaking from inside the trees themselves. Then I saw them. Figures. Not standing, not walking, just there, frozen in the mist, part of the landscape. Men, women, children. Some held objects, teddy bears, books, photographs, all mid-movement, like statues caught in the act of being almost remembered. Their eyes were closed, not peacefully, refusing, and carved into each of their chests, too late. One of them looked like the man from the bar, another like the boy from my primary school who disappeared and was never spoken of again. And one looked like me, the version I'd left behind. I stepped closer. His eyes opened, only mine, looking back, empty. I tried to run, but the forest held me. The trees curved toward me, the ground pulsed, and above that gray, unmoving sky trembled like a canvas stretched too tight. The voice returned, low and old and sad. When you remember someone too late, you don't bring them back. You only wake their shadow. My breath caught, because this wasn't just a place. It was a holding cell, a limbo for those remembered after they'd become someone else, after their shape had been altered by grief, by time, by silence. The morning hadn't come because no one had truly welcomed it. And I had returned too soon, or too late, or both. Then, from behind me, footsteps. Not mine, not theirs. Someone was still moving in this world, and they were looking for me.
The footsteps grew louder, measured, deliberate, not rushed, but with intention, like each step knew exactly where it was going. Toward me. I turned. At first, I saw nothing. Just trees shifting like ribs around a heart that refused to beat. Then, a figure, coming through the fog. Not a villager, not a shadow. Someone from the outside. She stepped into view slowly, mid-30s, dark hair, trembling hands clutching a leather-bound journal to her chest. And the moment I saw her face, I staggered back, because I knew her. My sister. But she was supposed to be gone. Moved overseas. Out of touch for years. We hadn't spoken since the funeral, the one neither of us cried at. She didn't smile. She just whispered, "I've been dreaming of you. Every night." My voice cracked. "How did you find me?" Her eyes welled up. "I started writing about you." She held up the journal. It was full, cover to cover, pages spilling out like desperate memories, photos, drawings, letters she never sent. She said, "I remembered you. Not who you were, but who I never bothered to see." The forest shifted. The light changed ever so slightly, like the sky was testing whether it should rise. She stepped forward and placed the journal in my hands. "I don't know if this will save you," she said, voice breaking. "But I remembered too late once already. I won't do it again." The moment the journal touched me, the world pulsed. The trees exhaled, and every frozen figure in the forest shivered. Their eyes remained closed, but their hands relaxed. The version of me, the statue I'd seen in the fog, crumbled to ash, not violently, not painfully, peacefully, like dust returning to breath. The roots pulled back, the voice in the earth went silent, and at last the sky cracked open. Not just light, morning, real, gold, undeniable. She looked at me and smiled through tears. "Let's go home." And for the first time in the entire story, I believed home still existed, because someone chose to return, not because they had to, but because they couldn't bear the thought of remembering me too late again. We left the forest as the light bled gold through the branches. No torches, no rituals, no footsteps behind us. Just the sound of leaves whispering goodbye, or maybe good luck. It was hard to tell with places like that. We didn't speak much. Words felt too clumsy, too small for the kind of remembering that had happened. But I felt it. Something inside me had returned. Not everything, not the version of me who had walked in, but the part that had been waiting, the one that wanted to be seen, not saved. Weeks passed. We went home, or rather, what was left of it. Photos were still there, old birthday cards, boxes of things neither of us had opened in years. We started sorting through them, and that's when I found it, tucked inside a faded envelope. No stamp, no address, just a name scribbled in the corner, one I didn't recognize, Naylin. It didn't belong to anyone in our family, no friend I could remember. Inside was a drawing, a crude one, clearly by a child. Two figures, holding hands, one smiling, the other crossed out. On the back, it simply said, "Don't forget me." Something in me shattered, because I knew that name, not from life, not from family, but from the village. A boy, thin, quiet, always watching from the edge of the rituals. He never spoke, never ate, he only followed. I had seen him, but I never asked his name, never reached for his hand, never remembered. He had followed me through the dream, through the village, through the ritual, and I had left him behind. That night I dreamed again, but this time I was the one standing still, and he, Naylin, was the one walking away, his back turned, his hands empty, no longer looking for anyone to see him. Just before the dream faded, he stopped, turned his head slightly, just enough for me to hear him whisper, "It's okay. You only forgot me because no one remembered you first." I woke up crying, because sometimes you escape the village, you come back to the world, you live, you laugh, you heal, but somewhere in the folds of your soul, there is one person you forgot to remember, and they never left.